It's 7:48 in the morning, and Tony pulls his 2013 Accord into the same spot at the far end of the lot, the spot nobody else wants. Someone in the break room is already pouring him a coffee they think he can't afford for himself. He says, "No thanks," the way he has for 11 years, and they read it as pride. It isn't. Tony's house has been paid off for years. His accounts crossed $2 million a while back. And here's the strange part. He used to be exactly like the guy parked 3 spots down in the brand new SUV. Tony is not cheap and he is not broke. He is doing one quiet thing on purpose, one habit that looks like poverty from the outside and is quietly building a fortune on the inside. You know a Tony, you work with one, you're related to one, you might be married to one, or the one that actually stings. You used to be one, back before the money got comfortable. Today I'll show you Tony's habit, why almost everyone gives it up the second they can afford to, and why that one decision quietly costs them everything. If you want to see exactly how it works, stick around, and if it's useful, a like and a subscribe tells me to keep making these. Here is Tony's habit with nothing hidden in it. He never let his life get more expensive than it was the day he started. That's the whole secret. Most people do the exact opposite without ever deciding to. The raise comes in and the car gets a little nicer. The bonus lands and the apartment gets a little bigger. The promotion arrives and suddenly the old furniture looks shabby, the old phone feels embarrassing, the old life feels too small for the new title. The money shows up and the lifestyle quietly opens its mouth and swallows it whole every single time. You've watched this happen to people you love. The cousin who got the good job and somehow has less breathing room now than when she was broke. The friend who doubled his income and still texts you on the 28th asking if you can spot him until payday. Tony watched it too. And early on he made a strange decision. When his money went up, his life would stay exactly where it was. He kept living like the version of himself who earned half as much, and he let the difference pile up somewhere quiet, out of sight, out of reach, year after year. On the inside, that gap between what he earned and what he let himself spend was the only thing that was ever going to make him free. Because that gap is where all of it gets built, not the salary, not the side hustle, not the lucky bet, the gap. And the habit is nothing more than refusing, for decades, to let it close. Here's where it actually started for him, because Tony wasn't born doing this. At 32, his father died, and the funeral was the first time Tony saw the real numbers. His dad had been the guy everyone admired, the nice cars, the bigger house every few years, the country club on Sundays, and underneath all of it was almost nothing. Debt stacked on debt, accounts nearly empty, a life that looked finished and arrived but had never actually been paid for. Tony stood in a parking lot after the service, looked at his own lease, his own credit card balance, his own apartment that cost more than he should have signed for, and realized he was 3 or 4 years from becoming the exact same story. That night was the first time in his life he did the real math, not what he made, what he kept, and the gap between those two numbers was so small it scared him straight. So let me show you what that gap is actually worth, because it's easy to talk about and easy to underestimate. I'll tell you about a woman I'll call Maya, because you already know 2 or 3 of her. Maya waited 4 years for a promotion, and when it finally came, it added about $800 a month to her take-home pay. She'd earned every dollar of it, and the night she got the news, she stood in her kitchen and felt, for the first time in a long time, like she could finally breathe. So she breathed. A nicer lease, because she'd earned it. A bigger grocery run, the good coffee, the better gym. A couple of subscriptions she meant to cancel and never did. None of it was reckless. Each piece felt small, reasonable, deserved. And within about 4 months, the $800 was simply gone, dissolved into a life that felt normal the instant she reached it. Here's the cruel part nobody warned Maya about. She wasn't happier. The promotion she'd wanted for 4 years bought her the exact same Sunday night dread, just at a slightly higher altitude. Now picture the version of Maya who did nothing. Same car, same place, same coffee. She takes that $800 a month, feeds it quietly into a plain index fund, and forgets it exists. At an ordinary market return, in 30 years, that one boring choice is worth close to $1 million. Not from luck, from a raise she'd already earned, and simply chose not to feel. That's the whole tragedy of lifestyle creep, and it almost never feels like a tragedy while it's happening. It feels like finally living. Every raise you let your life rise to meet is a withdrawal from a future you that you'll never get to meet. Maya didn't lose that money in a crash. She lost it on things that felt like breathing. The loudest place this habit shows up is the driveway, because the car is the one thing the whole world sees. Tony's manager, Greg, leases a new blacked-out SUV every 3 years for around $700 a month, and he'll be making a car payment until the day he retires, because there's always a next lease. To everyone in that parking lot, Greg is the one who made it, and Tony is the one who didn't. Run the actual numbers, and the picture flips completely. Tony bought a reliable used car for $15,000 and drove it for a decade. The difference between his costs and Greg's, call it $500 a month, went straight into the market instead of into a metal box that loses value while it idles at a red light. From 25 to 65 at historical market returns, that one ordinary swap is worth about $1.3 million. Be honest for a second. Which one is parked in your driveway right now? Because the new car was a slow disaster for Greg from the moment it became his. A new vehicle loses about a tenth of its value the second it leaves the lot, around 20% in the first year, and close to half by year 5. Greg isn't buying transportation. He's renting a feeling, and the feeling wears off by the second oil change, while the payment never does. The average new car payment in this country just hit a record, somewhere around $770 a month. Greg has the badge on the hood and a knot in his stomach every time the statement lands. Tony has the boring car and a number in an account that means he never has to feel that knot again. Same parking lot, 2 completely different lives, and the one that looks like winning is the one quietly losing. The same habit shows up in the house, except now the numbers are big enough to ruin people. And they do. Think about a couple you actually know. They worked hard, the income climbed, and they did exactly what you're supposed to do. They bought the dream house, the good zip code, the island in the kitchen, the rooms they pictured filling with a whole life, and from the day they got the keys, something quietly went wrong. The mortgage ate 40% of their take-home pay, then closer to 50 once the taxes and the insurance and the things that break in a big house got added in. They had the square footage and nothing left to live inside it. You've sat at their table. You've felt it even if you couldn't name it. The slightly too bright kitchen, the slightly too quiet dinner, the generic cereal in the 4,000 square foot house. The conversation never quite drifts near money, because there's a tightness there nobody wants to touch. They own a beautiful thing they're too broke to enjoy, and they'll spend the next 30 years paying for the privilege. Tony could have bought that house twice over in cash. He stayed in a 3-bedroom in an older neighborhood, with gutters that could use cleaning, because the small payment was exactly what kept his money free to grow. From the street, your friend's house looks like success, and Tony's looks like settling. On the balance sheet, the big house is one of the single most common reasons good, hard-working people reach 50 with nothing. It didn't make them rich. It made them broke with a beautiful kitchen and a quiet ache they could never quite explain. Here is where people misread Tony completely, because the habit was never about being cheap. Watch where his money actually goes. He'll drive 9 years on the same car and refuse to replace a phone that still works, and in the same week, write a check for his granddaughter's college fund without blinking. Ruthless on the things nobody sees. Generous on the things that last. You've been on the other side of this. You've paid full price for the version with the logo and called it treating yourself. Be honest about what it actually bought you, a moment of being seen, and the moment was over before you got back to the car. Money spent on looking a certain way is gone the instant it leaves your hand. Money spent on something real is still working for you 30 years later. So Tony starves the budget everyone can see and feeds the one nobody can. One crowd spends their whole life buying the costume. Tony quietly bought the thing the costume was only ever pretending to be. Now let me be honest with you, because there's a way to take this too far, and it becomes its own quiet prison. Tony is not a monk. He's not planning to die with a huge account and a small, grey life he never let himself enjoy. The habit was only ever a tool for one job, getting the gap wide enough early enough that the money does the heavy lifting instead of him. And once that machine is built and running, spending on the things that genuinely make life better isn't a betrayal of the habit. It's the entire reason he kept it. Tony flies now instead of doing the brutal 12-hour drive. He paid without flinching to be in the room when his grandkids were born. He buys the good boots that last 15 years and the plane ticket to the people he loves. The whole philosophy fits in one sentence. Spend freely on what actually makes your life better. Refuse to spend on what only makes your life look better to strangers. The first is the reward the habit was built to pay for. The second is the trap it was built to help you escape. Still, none of this is free, and Tony would be the first to tell you so. The habit costs something real. It just doesn't cost money. It costs you the way people look at you. You become the one who keeps the old car while the group trades up, the one who says no to the trip, who brings lunch, who doesn't have the thing everyone else just financed. People notice. Somebody makes the joke that's really a question. A relative quietly decides you must be struggling, and you sit there knowing the truth and saying nothing, because there's nothing you could say that wouldn't sound like bragging or lying. Think about someone you actually like, the friend who gets a bonus and buys the thing he's been talking about for months. For about 3 weeks, he's genuinely, visibly happy, and then he's just a guy with a thing and a payment, already eyeing the next one. You watch it happen, and you don't say a word, because nothing you could say would land right. That ache, that quiet not saying, is the real tax on Tony's habit, not dollars, the slow social cost of looking a little behind, paid at dinners and reunions for years. And most people simply cannot pay it. The fear of looking like they're failing is stronger than the wish to actually win. If that's you, drop a comment telling me the one thing you're going to change about your money this week. I read every one. Tony made his peace with looking behind a long time ago. He did the honest math on what being admired actually costs and decided the silence was the cheaper buy. Underneath the car and the house and the packed lunch, there's one thing about Tony that almost nobody can copy, and it has nothing to do with discipline. Tony genuinely does not care what you think of him. Not as an act, not as something he's working on. He's simply free of a weight that quietly bends almost every other person's whole financial life. He doesn't need the room to see the watch. He stopped keeping that scoreboard so long ago that he honestly forgets it exists, and you can feel it when you're near him. A kind of stillness most people never get close to. Here's what that freedom is worth in plain dollars. The moment you stop needing to perform, an enormous amount of spending just vanishes. The upgrade you bought so someone would notice, the round you grabbed so you'd seem generous, the outfit for the one night you saw those people and never again. By one survey from Schwab, the average person burns $400 to $500 a month on things they don't need, kept up and paid for in monthly installments spent on an audience that was never really watching. Most of us make our money decisions based on the imagined opinion of people who are themselves one missed paycheck from disaster. It's like taking swimming lessons from a man who's drowning. Tony climbed out of that pool a long time ago. He's not braver than you, and he's not smarter than you. He just quietly stopped competing in a race that has no finish line and never once paid a single dollar to anyone still running it. So if Tony's habit is this powerful, why does almost nobody keep it? Because it's hardest to hold at the exact moment it finally pays. Let me show you what that costs. 2 men were hired into the same company the same week, same job, same starting salary. I'll call them Ray and Sam. Ray celebrated the new job the way you're supposed to. He leased the car that matched the title, signed for the apartment that stretched him to the edge, upgraded the phone on schedule and the wardrobe on trend, always half a step ahead of every raise. For years, Ray looked like the one who was winning, and at the company parties, he was. Sam kept driving the car he already owned, and parked it most mornings a few spots down from a quiet older guy in a 2013 Accord. He split a modest place and routed a fifth of every paycheck into investments before the money ever touched his checking account. For years, Sam looked like the one who never quite arrived. Then life did the thing life always eventually does. A bad quarter, a reorganization, and on one ordinary Tuesday morning, Ray and Sam got the same envelope on the same desk. Same layoff, same severance. And in that single moment, years of invisible difference became the only thing that mattered. Ray had almost nothing saved, and a stack of payments that didn't pause just because his income did. Within 3 weeks, he took the first job that called, on their terms, because the obligations never stopped to ask how he was doing. Sam had a cushion deep enough to breathe. He took a few months, turned down 2 offers that weren't right, and accepted the one that was on his own timeline. Same salary the whole way. Same town. The only difference was that one of them spent years buying the look of wealth, and the other spent it quietly buying the real thing. The biggest thing Tony built, he'll never see finished, because it doesn't arrive in his lifetime. It arrives in his kids and in theirs. Picture 2 children at 2 different dinner tables. At the first table, money is a tight, quiet subject, the thing the parents fight about in low voices after the kids are supposed to be asleep. That child learns, without a single lesson, that money is fear and that the way you prove you're okay is to buy something other people can see. They inherit the anxiety like an heirloom nobody asked for. At Tony's table, the car is paid off, the raise gets invested, and the word equity gets said as casually as passing the salt. That child grows up watching calm, watching a gap that grows quietly in the background, watching two parents who simply are not afraid. And that child starts their whole life from a place Tony had to claw his way toward. Tony thinks about his father sometimes, still, usually around the holidays, about the parking lot after the funeral, the moment he finally did the real math. His kids will never have that parking lot moment. They won't ever need it. The ceiling Tony spent years pushing against just isn't there for them. They'll never even know it existed. That's what the man in the old Accord is really building. Not a number. A different starting line for somebody who isn't born yet. If you want to start building the same thing, you don't have to change your whole life this week. There's one rule Tony's lived by since that night in the parking lot, and it's simple enough to actually keep. Call it the freeze rule. The next time your money goes up, a raise, a bonus, anything at all, you do three things, in order. First, you freeze your spending exactly where it is, before the new number has time to feel normal. Second, you move the entire difference somewhere it can grow, automatically, the same day it lands, so it never sits in a checking account long enough to get attached to you. Third, you wait 1 full year before you let yourself spend any of it on something new. And by then, you usually don't want to. That's it. That's the whole rule. Freeze your number, move the gap, wait it out. Everything else Tony does is just what that one decision looks like from the outside. It's 7:48 in the morning again, and Tony pulls into the same spot at the far end of the lot, the one nobody else wants. He's going to eat the lunch he packed and say no thanks to the offered coffee and let everyone keep believing he's the one who never quite made it. And he's going to be, by a distance none of them can imagine, the freest person in the building. Here's the only question that matters. When your money goes up, does your life quietly go up with it? Or does it hold still while the gap underneath it grows? If almost everyone says they'd keep the habit, almost no one does. The world will never stop telling you the upgrade is the reward, that the new thing is what arriving looks like, that living below your means is something you outgrow. It's the most expensive advice you'll ever take. The flashy ones are performing a future. The quiet ones are building one. And from the outside, you genuinely can't tell them apart, which is exactly the way the quiet ones like it. Be a Tony. Pick the gap, keep the habit, and let them think whatever they want. If this changed even one decision you make this month, subscribe and tell me in the comments what you're freezing first.